Welcome to the Human Evolution Podcast, where we dive deep into the science, philosophies, and strategies that create real and lasting change. I'm Goldstein, and here we leave traditional self-help behind and map the real terrain of true personal development.
I'm assuming is like the need for one to control somebody else.
To be in, no, not necessarily to control someone else, to actually the sense of needing to be in control of a situation. And I see that with you. I experience it with myself. I've experienced it with so many people. And I know I've already told you the story about me and the ayahuasca. And the thing that finally got me to a place of feeling comfortable was when I finally managed to surrender. And that to me made such a big difference because our society is set up in such a way that nowadays, like, we feel like we have to absolutely know exactly what we're going to be doing, how we're going to be doing it. And if we don't, we feel overwhelmed within 2 seconds. Right. And I can just see this with so many of my clients. And like I say, even with myself to a degree, it's gotten better over the years. But I'd say one of the largest issues in society today is just the fact that you always feel like you need to know exactly how things are going to go. And if you don't, anxiety just shoots up exponentially. And that's what I really want to talk to you.
What do you think the evolutionary roots of that are? I mean, obviously we can think back to, we don't know what's going to be around the next corner. We don't know what's going to be behind the next bush kind of thing. We're always trying to map things out. I would imagine our brains are huge now, but I can imagine as, we evolved over time, they couldn't hold as much information. So for example, like from my daily life, I've probably done something a million times and something unpleasant may have happened to me at one point. I just didn't hold it because I've done it a million times. So instead of my brain saying, hey, remember you've done this a million times and you brushed your teeth and you only cut your gums at one time, I imagine my brain, instead of trying to drudge that up again, is probably like, worry about this, or dental hygiene's a bad example. But you know what I mean? Like, we're always looking for that monster around the next corner. So what are your thoughts on where we've come as a species and to now?
I mean, I think when you think about it, the human being has been set up not to thrive, but to just survive. The whole idea of biology is basically survive long enough to create the next generation. In order to survive, you don't need to worry about being happy. What you need to worry about is maintaining your heart beating, And so when it's all said and done, we're actually more wired towards anxiety than we are towards joy. It's just the way our brains have worked because that is what evolution required us to be. And so we're just naturally anxiety producing mechanisms inside of ourselves right now, that every single thing that we do, we're trying to figure out, like, I mean, where's the danger in this? What could go wrong? Just because, like you said, it's just the way that's been wired into us. Then you take that and imagine a large group of people, let's just call it government as such, or whatever you want to call it, the society as a whole, whatever you want to call it, that basically now says, these are the rules for us to continue along this path. And what happens is now all of a sudden you've got this anxiety that's trying to focus in on these rules, trying to fit in. I heard something really, really interesting a few days ago that really it struck me pretty beautifully. And it was the concept that there is no such thing as laziness, that it's a human created topic. And it really struck me as something pretty beautiful. And the thought experiment I did with myself, and so forgive me if it doesn't end up right because it's just really something I'm playing around it inside my own mind, is ignoring any kind of like religion or anything else. But if you imagine a soul up in heaven, if there is that kind of thing, whatever it is, a soul up in heaven that's getting everything at once would never be lazy, right? Like, I mean, like when you think about it, if you are in your heaven experience, you're never lazy because you're getting everything you want. Life is good. Now, bring it down to human beings. And what happens is you now have a certain job that you need to accomplish. And when you don't do that thing, you are quote unquote lazy because you're not doing what's necessary. And it's a really interesting thing when you put it from that point of view, in terms of society has said that if you don't accomplish this and this and this, you are a bad member of society. You are being lazy. And I feel like and so what happens is we start putting all these judgments upon ourselves or upon other people, sitting there saying, he's lazy, this act is lazy, whatever it is. And the thing I really love about human evolution movement and why that struck me so deeply is my belief is, if you can evolve beyond that way of thinking and go to the level of actually looking at what is it in my life that actually inspires me? What is in my life that actually I want to do in my life? You're never going to be lazy because you're going to be moving towards the things that you enjoy. But it really does, as you mentioned, as we spoke about before, it does really break that necessity inside of yourself of paying attention to where is the danger coming in this next moment in my life.
It's hard for people to rest because I'm like, oh shit, like I don't feel really well right now, but I just want to lay down for a bit. The thing is, we forget is however many years humans have been on the planet, 150,000, this particular species, we're set up to, once we eat or once we have everything we need, to move as little as possible, to economy of effort. Like we're supposed to not move. So it's, when people are like, oh, like, what are you going to, you're going to go lay down or whatever, like, are you sure you should be napping in the middle of the day or shouldn't, or we do it to ourselves. Shouldn't I be up mowing the lawn or doing something else? We're actually fighting against a lot of evolution, a lot of like instincts, because we're
Exactly.
supposed to conserve as much fucking energy as possible,
But now society has created in such a way that, like, if you don't work 40 hours a week, or if you don't get X and Y done before the end of this deadline, whatever it is, you're obviously a bad member of society. And the
Hmm.
challenge is society is increasing with technology. It's increasing at such a fast rate that our our neurology just isn't wired to be able to do that. And because our neurology isn't wired to do that, what we do is we just enter into this level of anxiety and overwhelm. And the way we try to deal with it is, instead of just surrendering to the fact of it will get done when it gets done, we go into a place of, how do I control the variables to be able to make everything happen? Do you know what? If if I need to get this and this done, let me get a new calendar software. Let me figure out a new piece of technology that makes life easier. Let me hire more people, whatever it is. As opposed to going back to the deeper level and sit there saying, my body is in a state of constant anxiety. And the first thing I need to do is actually realize the fact that this is not the way I was made. I was made to actually, like you said, do something, rest for a bit, give my body a chance to recharge, and then I can approach the next task with all this vigor inside of me and be ready for it. It's not what society has allowed it for right now.
And the knowledge work revolution really screwed all that up. I don't know what the labor force ratio is between people who actually have to go do physical things versus ones that just work with our brains, if you want to call it that. But unless you force yourself, and here's the problem I've had with that too. I'll work on the weekends, which I actually enjoy because it's kind of my quiet time. I actually, when I do, I actually really do enjoy that. But sometimes I'm like, well, shit, I don't really have anything to do this afternoon. I could go for a walk. But then, of course, the thoughts start creeping in that, oh shit,
Guilt.
or I'm not going to be able to keep up with the next person because it's such a competitive world out there that I'm like, well, I'm done with all my work right now. But so instead of just being done with what I was supposed to do today, why shouldn't I be doing more? Like, why can't I do more? And I think that that's a huge, huge problem. It causes a
It
ton
so
of
is.
stress.
And taking that to the concept of like Instagram, for example, or whatever it is, where people are posting their pictures of them at their best at every moment.
Yeah.
Like, you just don't see the person that struggled for 8 months. You see the person with like just the venture capital funding for $10 million, and you go like, oh my God, he did it and he went to high school with me. Why can't I do that? Or whatever it is, right? And so we're seeing the best of everyone's life without seeing the worst. And these are the comparisons we're throwing into our minds. And it just completely throws all of our logic askew. Like, there's a story I heard years and years ago, and as you know, I butcher every story, but I still love telling them, that a guy goes to visit India, and he's a successful CEO of a company, and he sees like this fisherman sitting on a dock, and this guy is just pulling out fish after fish after fish. This guy just has it down pat. Like, I mean, like, he's got the right bait, knows exactly where to throw it, knows exactly how to do it. And he's just pulling in hundreds of fish, whatever that number is. And he walks up to the guy on the dock and he goes, wow, that is so amazing. Like, I mean, did you ever think to like train more people to do the thing you do? And the guy says, well, why would I do that? And he goes, well, if you train more people, then what you could do is, like, I mean, you could earn more money when you sell it at market. He goes, okay, and what would that do for me? And he goes, well, if you sold all these fish at market, then what you could do is you could actually get like you could get ships and get people on ships and really expand even more. He goes, and what would that do for me? He goes, well, once you got all these ships, you could open up a large corporation. He goes, and why would I do that? He goes, you could go public. He goes, and once I go public, what then? He goes, well, then you'd have so much money, you could retire. And he goes, and why would I do that? He goes, well, then you could do whatever you wanted. And the guy's like, you mean like sitting on the dock and fishing? It's just one of those things. And this is, for me, it's one of my main rules. As you know, I've got my 4 main rules, but the one is you have no clue how to be happy. And the idea is that we think we need to do this and this and this and this and this in order to get to that final state. And we're so stuck in the concept of society that we have to be a doing population, that we forget that the real act of being a human is literally in the word being a human being, being happy, being comfortable, taking care of yourself, being at peace. But we say, well, in order for me to get to peace, I need to work this number of hours so I can finally retire and have enough money sitting in my bank account. And now I need to control that because I don't know how to do that. And that guy is ahead of me. And
Yeah.
you're just stuck in this terrible, terrible way.
Yeah. And other people don't help either. So, for example, when we're back in the Detroit area where we are now after traveling, because when I'm around the world traveling, I'm with other nomads, that term again.
Yeah.
But we're around like-minded people that, like, most people work remote and they do all manner of things. We come back here, and when I go places and I get in a conversation like with the dentist or somebody at the gym, whatever, like, oh, what do you do? I'm like, well, I do this, this, and this. It's all remote. They're like, oh my gosh, that's so lucky. I'm like, oh fuck. I'm like, then I start thinking, like, I start getting guilty. I'm like, oh my God. Then I forget about all the hard work it took me to get here. And I discount everything I've done to get here. Now I'm just like, shit. Oh, I didn't have to commute today. I am wearing gym clothes again. So my brain starts going in this spiral of, I'm not doing enough. Oh my God, this guy had to get up and put on
That is
this.
so interesting that you
Yeah.
got a guilt out of that.
Yeah, because I'm like, oh my gosh, you're right. And I started thinking about, like, luck had nothing to do with it. As I was living off savings for 8 months, watching YouTube, I stopped drinking for that long. If I really think about what it took to get here, it fucking sucked. But because some other people aren't willing to do that. And then I see people getting up super early and going to their, because we're in Detroit, so there's a lot of factory jobs around here. And I'm like, no, they might love that. I want nothing to do with that. I start feeling guilty, like, oh, they have to get up and go to work. That sucks. And so instead of just saying, oh, I'm so glad I am where I am, I'm so glad I've done what I've done, I'm like, oh shit, I'm not working hard enough. It's just weird. It's some weird human thing, and I don't think it's just me. I think it's just
It's
we compare
far from
ourselves to
just
everybody
you.
around. Yeah.
But this takes us back to something that we've discussed many times, what I call the emotional home. And it's
Hmm.
interesting to me that, like, in your description, 2 or 3 times, you mentioned how guilty you feel.
Yeah.
And to me, that's really, really interesting, because what that basically points out to me is the fact that you, as a general emotion inside of yourself, your home base is feeling guilty about your life. Like, you guilt yourself into being productive. You guilt yourself into doing more. You guilt yourself about the life you're living right now.
Yeah.
And it's just what you've been taught to be. And so what happens is, because you're so guilty and you want to get beyond that, you feel like that the right thing to do is to control the situation more, to basically, like, have more variables that you can take care of. So, like, if I wake up earlier, if I go to the gym more, whatever it is, and you start creating all these rules about yourself because you think that is what's going to alleviate the guilt. And
Yeah.
now, what if in this crazy world that we live in, the correct way to alleviate the guilt is, crazy thought, stop feeling guilty.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
just a person tells you you're so lucky, and instead of feeling guilty about it, just say, like, yeah, you know what? Like, it's like I did a lot to get here, and like other people can do it too. And like it's I really feel grateful. Like, what if gratitude replaced guilt for you,
Yeah.
right?
I always get to that, but it takes me a while. Like, I do actually come back around to that, but my initial reaction is like, oh shit, maybe I should be, like, at work more, or whatever. Sometimes I'll get up really early because some people have better workouts at different times of the day. I'm one of those people.
Mm-hmm.
I just get a better workout in the morning. I've tried in the afternoon. It's just not my thing. I wish I could, but my morning workouts are usually the best. Usually because I'm fasted and whatever. But I'll get up some mornings at 5 o'clock here and go to the gym down the street. It's open 24 hours, and I'll work out. I got no fucking reason to be awake. I don't really have anything to do that morning that's going to take any more than a couple of hours. And then I'm back here at the house, and it's like 7 in the morning. But because I got up and I went to the gym, I feel great about myself. Even though I could have slept till 9 and gotten the same amount of shit done and still gone to the gym. But it's just like that psychological thing of, like, I got to be up early too.
And so let's play around with that for a moment, because
Sure.
like this is exactly what I'm talking about the control aspect, or the guilt thing. And I really want you to understand the concept of emotional home. That, like,
Mhm.
it's it's not that you make yourself guilty. It's just that your brain, your neurology is wired to go to that feeling of guilt faster than any other emotion you have. You've pre-wired that path inside of your brain as such. And so, like, let's just play around with that for a moment in terms of, like, so let's just say you wake up because you want to wake up at 5 a.m., or that's what your natural clock has you do. What if after you get back from gym, you say, I'm going to spend an hour and do my Vipassana meditation, or I'm going to spend an hour and walk and think about life? It's like, it was an interesting thing. Just another thing that I saw just a few days ago was they were comparing Naval Ravikant to Elon Musk. Are you familiar with
Mm.
Naval Ravikant?
Yeah, I don't know that they're similar at all. I'm very familiar with both of them, and I know I've read all Naval's stuff. Brilliant guy.
Yeah, the
I
Naval
don't.
Minak, as he calls it, right?
Yeah, the Naval back. Tim
Yeah,
Ferriss produced that. Yeah, I don't know that I find them to be similar at all. I think Naval's very
that's the interesting thing.
thoughtful.
They're
Yeah.
the only thing that makes them similar is that they're both extremely successful individuals. They're both
Right.
billionaires.
Right. Right.
And the thing is, Elon Musk wakes up first thing in the morning, goes and does 20,000 different things, and is 100 miles per hour from sun up to sundown kind of thing. And Naval says he wakes up and the first 2 hours of his morning he wants to sit there and just think, just
Yeah.
contemplate life. And the interesting thing is, the reason why I brought it up is some would say that Naval didn't do badly for himself, So
Yeah.
apparently,
Yeah.
like, even in today's society, if you choose to do things differently, it doesn't mean that you're going to be the outcast that loses. You can
Yeah.
set the rules for yourself to win the game in whatever way you want. And the the part I'm inviting you here to is, like, I get the fact that you've focused in on the people that are go 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 do do do. This is the way to move through life. And what if you just chose better heroes? Like, what if you actually just said, maybe after gym, what I want to do is meditate. Maybe what I want to do is sleep late one morning and start my day later and actually treat myself well. And instead of feeling guilty, actually go into a place of self love in that moment and say, I'm doing something really good for myself.
Yeah, it's interesting because as you're talking, I'm thinking of Naval in particular. Like one of the things he always says, I could be stripped of all my money and everything right now, and you could drop me on another continent, and I know within 5 years I'm going to be rich again. Just
Yep.
just because of his mindset, and like he's like, you put me anywhere, I will be rich again. He said it has nothing to do with what I've got, because just my mindset and everything else. So I always thought that was pretty admirable. That's pretty cool that he just, that's the way he works. But I think, I wouldn't
And
trade places with any of these people, because I used to have to do 9 to 5 work, or actually longer than that with the government. I hated every minute of it. But for some reason, I just feel like, I'm not doing it. And then of course, there's always that underlying with me, there's always that undercurrent of, um, if things get too good, like, it's something's going to be taken away from me, which I know is bullshit on intellectually, but still, like, feeling it, like, oh, there's so many good things happen in a row. I haven't had any bad experiences this week. You know what I mean? It's like I feel like there's always that creeping thing that's going to come in, something bad's going to happen, which I know is irrational.
so it's not only irrational, it's like, I mean, and again, this is number one of my four rules as such, and we've said it so many times, is if you really just consider the concept of you are immature, as I said it. And basically what happened was, let's just rewind you back to first grade, whatever it was, and at some point in time, your mom gave you like the best toy ever, and you're in first grade, and you're playing with a toy, and you're like, I love this, I love this. And another kid that's bigger than you, Jimmy, is a big bully, and Jimmy walks up to you and hits you in the back of the head and takes your toy. And as a first grader, as a 7-year old, whatever it is, in your brain, you come up with a new decision saying, if I'm not prepared for bad things to happen to me while good things are happening, I'm going to be in trouble. I'm going to get hurt again. And so a 7-year old makes a decision sitting there saying, I should never feel too comfortable while things are good because bad things could happen.
Yeah.
Makes perfect sense for a 7-year old. But the
Yeah.
thing is, if that doesn't get examined over the course of your life, what happens is, as a 43-year-old, you still have a 7-year-old that's afraid of getting hit in the back of the head by Jimmy, who's going to take away his toys. So what happens to you
Yeah.
now is good things happen to you, and that 7-year-old inside of you is literally a voice in the back of your head sitting there saying, watch out,
Yeah.
watch out. You know what happened to you in the past, and it's dangerous. And it's just time to realize the fact that the person that's driving the bus is not you. It's that little child inside of you that is still, as we said from the beginning of the conversation, focused in on the anxiety that feels this is what he needs to focus in order to survive. I need to be safe because if I'm not safe, something bad will happen to me.
Yeah.
And the thing I want you to really understand is that a percentage of the population, let's call it 20% of the population, let's not even make it the majority of the population, but a percentage of the population doesn't have the same fear you do. This is not something that's wired into people. There's a certain group of the population, let's just say 1 in 5 people, that good things happen to them. And in the back of their heads, they go, that's awesome and I deserve it.
And there's some people that take it to the extreme, and they do bad things, and they're like, yeah, no big deal. Like there's that
Yeah,
spectrum of people, like we always talk
of
about.
course.
No, it's funny you say that the different percentage of the population of people who realize and don't realize and have feelings. It wasn't until recent years I just thought everybody thought like me, like with being anxious and
Yeah.
certain things that I like and don't like. And I've literally started to notice, probably in the last 5 years, being a room full of people, there's some deadline or something's coming up, or there's some show coming on in a little while, and I'm like, oh, we have to do these 10 things before the show comes on. I'm looking around the room and I'm like, how come nobody else is fucking concerned right now? Like, I started noticing, like, wait a second, like, this is not just a me thing, but it's not everybody. And that was a bit of an eye opener too, because I
Amen.
just assumed that everybody else thought that way. I didn't feel bad about it. I was like, oh, this is comforting now. Like, oh shit, good. Because I would rather I'm doing something wrong in here that I can fix than thinking, why is nobody else fucking panicking? Like, our flight's in 6 hours. We got to we got to go to the airport now, kind of thing. And of course, there's there are people on the other end of the spectrum. I'm
Of
not going to
course.
mention any names. My girlfriend who like doesn't, it's good because she balances me out, but like there's certain things that I wish she would worry about more. Like, we got to fucking go, kind of thing. So, but it's nice to have that balance. But speaking of airplanes, I just thought of this. Talk about surrendering like in its purest form. You know how some people panic
Mm-hmm.
on flights because they're not in
Yeah.
control of the plane or in the car? That's what I think of when I think of giving up control, like in its purest sense of like,
Okay.
trusting your life to somebody else and not being able to fucking do anything about it. You can't even get into the cockpit, even if you were a pilot, you know?
Yeah. And so think about that. So like, I mean, given the fact that you're now in a car and someone else, let's take the airplane because it's like it's a locked cockpit, you're not allowed in, you cannot get in there. What benefit does worrying give you? You've already stepped onto the plane. I get the idea of worrying before you get on the plane. What benefit when you're on the plane do you get aside from having an uncomfortable flight or an uncomfortable death, if that's where it takes you, right? Like, I mean, I'm not saying if the plane starts crashing towards the ground that you go, que sera, but I'm saying, given the fact that you have no control over it, where does the need to control fit in? Like, I mean, like I understand the idea of worrying when you got something to do about it, but I was actually just working with a client about this last week. What I say is worry productively. If there's something you can do, worry. As soon as you figured out what to do, if you continue to worry, all you're doing is you're muddying the waters of your productivity. So
Yeah.
when you're choosing a flight, look at the track record of certain things, and you choose airline A over airline B. We're not going to
It,
mention any names, which one
is
is
it a
good or bad.
Boeing or is it an Airbus? Because
There we
that
go.
matters. Yeah.
Something along
Yeah.
those lines, or don't jump on the two-seater plane. I could understand your logic there, but
Yeah.
as soon as you've made that decision, what benefit do you have once you're sitting on the plane and you can't get to the cockpit? What benefit does trying to control that situation have when you have zero control over
I
it?
used to be nervous flying, and of course I would have a couple drinks on the plane. But the thoughts running through my head were, well, I'm in this seat now, can't do anything about it. If it crashes, it's probably going to be quick, like, so I'm like, what does it matter now? But it took me a long time to come to that,
Of
conclusion, which
course.
I know is the extreme example. But as far as just the need to control, that's the one that always sticks out of my mind of like the major one that most people think of. I imagine you see clients with these issues all the time. And what's a good extreme example of this?
So the two extreme examples I'll give is, I mean, number one is because we're now dealing with Brittany's clients a lot more, that you can see it very much so in terms of a physical issue where a
Mhm.
person's worry can lead to digestive issues, diseases, literal diseases. So like if a person is, I was just chatting with a person yesterday about this specifically, that just has a very high level of anxiety because they have no control over the situation. We didn't get down to the core of it. This was just a conversation to figure it out. But something happened to him in his childhood. So again, a child is driving the bus. He's being immature, and he has this high level of anxiety, and that leads him to straight away having it's. I'm not mentioning any names. I can mention this in this way. He's got erectile dysfunction. He has kidney problems. He's got adrenal fatigue, and he's starting to have a lot of other issues showing up in terms of digestive issues. So that is one example where just your anxiety, just from a pure physiological point of view, ignoring the idea of erectile dysfunction, which could be something else that's purely mental, but specifically adrenal fatigue, you have so much cortisol coursing through your system. You have so many stress hormones coursing through your system that you're going to have your body trying to fight it by saying, I need to push myself harder, right? My adrenaline needs to course right now through my system. You're constantly in the state of fight or flight.
Yeah.
And so that's where it starts showing up in terms of physical issue. And so imagine, and again, same kind of concept going specifically to Brittany's clients, for example, is if you have a person that's in a constant state of fight or flight, Think about it. When you are fighting off a saber-toothed tiger or when you're running away from a saber-toothed tiger, the last thing that you need is to bring energy into your digestive path. You need to bring digestion into your hands to punch. You need to bring energy into your feet to run. You need to bring energy into your eyes to look. Your digestion gets the least amount of energy at that moment just because that is what your body's been trained to do in order to survive. So it will figure out how to digest when you're safe again, right? So if you're in a constant cycle of high, high, high anxiety, what's going to happen? You're not going to be able to digest food well. The food is going to get stuck in your colon over time, and you're going to start having issues. It's just a natural thing. So that
Yeah.
comes as one point of it. The other side of it, the emotional side of it, would be things like people developing agoraphobia, for example, or developing extra kinds of. So very often what happens is when a person has a certain level of anxiety, what happens is the brain is trying to protect them and figure out what is it that's dangerous to them in this moment. So if you have a high level of anxiety and you are driving a car over a bridge, and your high level of anxiety is because you're worried about how am I going to finish this and this and this, and I got to get my kids here and whatever it is. But you're so close on the verge of a panic attack, but you're driving over a bridge. And then what happens is your brain makes a connection sitting there saying, maybe bridges are dangerous. Maybe that's what's scaring me right now. And next thing you know, you're afraid to drive on bridges. So now you don't drive on bridges. And then you stay at home. And then you feel a bit safer when you're laying in bed and not thinking. And then you go out to the grocery store. And all of a sudden you start having that feeling of a panic attack again. You go, maybe it's the fluorescent lighting in this grocery store. Maybe that's why I need to stay away from fluorescent lighting. And so what happens is you start making your world smaller and smaller and smaller because you're in this constant state of anxiety. And no jokes, I've spoken to people that could not leave their house. I've spoken to people that it was a concerted effort for them to actually turn on Zoom because they were afraid of the radiation that the computer would give them. It's like,
Yeah.
I mean, this can go pretty bad for a lot of people when you don't deal with the real issues driving this for you.
Yeah. I was smiling when you were talking about the bridge thing. So when I was younger, and this is up to very recently, but when I was younger, well, still is the case. My mom's father's still alive, and in order for them to visit us from Michigan to northern Minnesota, they would have to go through Duluth, and Duluth from Superior, Wisconsin, over to Duluth, there's a bunch of bridges. They couldn't drive on bridges. My grandparents couldn't, so my mom would have to drive down and get them. So as an adult, I started becoming very, very terrified of driving over bridges, to the point where even because to get from where we are in Lower Michigan to where my family home is up in the UP Upper Peninsula, we have to go across the Mackinac Bridge, which is fucking huge. And then I lived in Key West, so it's nothing but bridges all the way down, albeit they're lower to the water. So what I would eventually I got in my mind, I don't know if it was like a seed planted because grandpa couldn't do it or whatever it was. It just like it started building in my mind, like, oh my gosh, these bridges are whatever. So like in the Keys, I would have to stop and, which nobody was pulling my leg to do this, but I would stop and have a couple drinks here, stop and have a couple drinks there. And I was able to,
Smart thing to do while driving.
yeah, I was able to traverse the bridges. No problem. No problem. But like even going across the Mackinac Bridge, which I'll probably do again this fall, and it's only recently, the last couple of times I've been over it, where I haven't had any, because I would see not the pilings, but like the stanchions or the whatever they call those things in the distance, and I would start to like tunnel vision. I would start to like panic or like what a light anxiety attack, and then I would start going up of it. I'm like, oh, I can't turn back now, because up until the point you can't get off on that last exit, I'm just like, oh my God, I need to fucking get off. Like I need to get out of this car.
So,
And I would get up in the middle of the bridge, and I would like, and of course I'm on it and I'm looking around and everything's fine. And then once I crest the top of it and start coming down, it's like this huge euphoric release of like, okay, I'm on my way back down again. That was a huge problem for me though,
of
for
course.
10, 15 years. And I was like, I know I'm just talking myself into it, because I would even see signs for the bridge, like Mackinac Bridge, 20 miles. And I'm like, oh God, it's coming, and I'm
Yeah.
like, how silly is that? Now, of course, is there a chance I'm
Well,
on it and it collapses? Sure. But, but like, how silly is that? It would drive me crazy, actually. If there was a way around it, I would have gone around it, but it's fucking impossible.
so to look at this from a neuropsychological perspective, in NLP, it's something that's called anchors, if you're familiar with that at all. But
Mm,
basically, the idea is If you think back to, for example, your first kiss or the first date that you had that was just really, really amazing, it's very common that a person will actually remember the song that was playing on the radio. And whenever they hear that song, they just go back into that amazing feeling of just being in that state of just absolute love and connection, whatever it is. That is what's called anchor. When you are in a heightened emotional state and something unique in your environment happens, you tend to connect those things even if it doesn't make sense. So you're very happy, you're feeling connected, you're kissing the person for the very first time, and the song plays and it goes that way. Or you smell a certain perfume and you remember that smell, and then from whenever forth you actually hear that, you smell that perfume again, you go right back into that amazing feeling. The challenge is anchors also happen on the other side of it, where if
Mm.
something bad is happening, anything that is in your environment in that point. So I actually just heard this last week. This was we're not going to go into the political thing of it, but I just heard this, and I don't know how accurate it is, but it's just such a powerful thing. So when they first created the polio vaccine, and again, I butcher stories, please forgive me. But when they first created the polio vaccine, what they discovered was that if they inject the dead polio virus into a person, then the immune system realized that there's something bad to have to fight, and it would figure out how to fight it. And the person would get immunization to polio. But what they also discovered was the immune system would have that immunization for a week or a month or a year or whatever that was, but it wouldn't last very long. So what they discovered, though, was if they injected the dead cells of the poliovirus at the same time, along with a certain mercury that the body freaked out when it got. So
Hmm.
what would happen was they would inject the cells of the polio along with mercury XYZ, whatever the isotope is, and the immune system freaked out. The immune system freaked out, and in that moment, what it does is it takes a snapshot and it says, "Okay, fine, something right here, right now, is dangerous to me, and I need to figure out how to protect myself from it."
Hmm.
So yes, it says the mercury is dangerous, but it also says, "Oh, maybe it's this virus that's dangerous." And because the immune system goes so crazy around it, it then develops immunization to polio that lasts for years and years, perhaps even lifetimes, however long that is. And the way that that happens is by creating a very strong emotional response, or let's just call it nervous system response. And at that time, having specific things such as the dead polio cells. So
Hmm.
the dead polio cells by themselves gives you a week worth of immunization. With this mercury that freaks out your immune system, gives you a 10 years worth of immunization or a lifetime worth of immunization. In the same way, the thing that's happening here with anchoring is you are driving along a bridge and you're connected to your grandfather, whatever it is. And as you're driving along the bridge, your brain in the back in the back is sitting there thinking, grandfather was afraid. What would make him afraid? What would he be feeling? And you all of a sudden start feeling this fear and you start driving down the bridge. And then another time you're stressed a bit more and you drive down the bridge and you go, I don't remember why, but last time I was kind of afraid and now I feel even more afraid.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. Not to stop you, but that's
Please.
because it happened a couple of times. Then after that, it was just I couldn't break out of it
The
because I'm like, well,
self-fulfilling
fuck it.
prophecy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And so the thing that you actually do in this case, and that's what I said, like, I mean, instead of feeling guilty each time, what if you just stopped being guilty? What you do is you actually create the opposing feeling inside of yourself and you reconnect it. So what I do with clients, and I'm making it sound a lot more simple than it is, but I create a state of dissociation where you just feel like I'm just happy. I don't really care about anything. Everything is good. And then I have them think about bridges, or I create a state of absolute power and strength and just feeling like they can take over the world. And then I have them think about driving over a bridge. And so what happens is you swing the pendulum far enough in the opposite direction that when you actually let go of the pendulum, you just hit right back to center. So it's what's called collapsing anchors. What you do is you just create enough of the positive to cancel out the negative.
I'm trying to think of what I did to break out of it, but I think it was along those lines where I might have even gotten angry. I may have been like, "Fuck you, bridge!" Like I know I turned up some other feeling,
Yeah.
and then by the
So
time I may have started feeling a little jittery, I was already coming down off the other side. I'm like, "Well, there we go. There's that one."
yeah.
Yeah.
So there's two main ways that people get over it. I'm going to call it emotional and logical. So generally speaking, when a person has a phobic response, which is what I'm going to call this, even though it's not necessarily a specific phobia, but a phobia is nothing more than you have a specific stimulus and you get a certain response. In this case,
Mm.
it's negative. So the one thing you do is, like I just said, you swing the pendulum enough in the opposite direction that the pendulum ends up centered. But another thing that happens in a phobic response is, like we said about your guilt, You've got one level of wiring in your brain. I see a bridge, I feel scared. I don't know anything different. And what
Mm-hmm.
you can do with that person is you can actually open up the brain to have more thoughts around it. So you ask questions along the lines of, what is it about bridges that scares you? How can you think about bridges differently in such a way that you can actually see them as something that isn't scary? Have you ever been on a bridge and not been scared? If you were to step into the shoes of someone that's on a bridge and not scared, what are they thinking that you're not thinking? And what you're looking to do is basically stop the one path that the brain is going on and create multiple others. So the brain now has a choice of where to go instead of just going down this one path over and over again and making that the only path that it can go down.
Like that short circuit, because for a while there, I was even trying this thing where on the other side of a panic attack or an anxiety or even just getting flush, on the other side of that's usually like kind of a euphoric, calm feeling, at
Mm-hmm.
least for me anyway. So every now and again, if I was approaching a bridge, I'll use that as the example still. And I started like, oh my gosh, I'm going to pass out behind the wheel. Never happened, but sometimes I would tell myself, this is okay because it's going to feel really good on the other side. And that didn't always stop it from
So can
happening.
you see? Can you
But
see how that is
yeah,
swinging the pendulum in the opposite direction? Like, so
yeah,
what you're doing now is that you're going over the bridge and you're thinking about the euphoria on the other side. So now you're associating that feeling while you're on the bridge, which is
yeah.
fantastic.
And I'm telling you, but this was just as early as last year. I'm like, I literally would come up to the exit, like the last one on either side of it, thinking like, I got to pull off here, and I don't know what I would do. I still have to go. I still have to go on the thing. But yeah, it's so powerful, man. It's so overpowering.
Catch your
Well,
breath as such, yeah.
I was going to try to throw out another real world example of how some people can't ride in a car with other people driving, and some of the things that people can do about that. I don't know if I can top the bridge one though.
Let's just say you're in the car with someone and that person is driving and you're freaking out. It's back to that same thing I told you before. What you need to do is you need to swing the pendulum in the opposite direction or think about things differently. And to me, the strongest way I've managed to do that, short of working with a person such as me or doing something specific therapeutically, is the concept of surrendering to the situation. That
Mm,
concept of that person is driving. If I jump and grab the steering wheel out of his or her hand, it's probably not going to help the situation at all. So
mm,
what I need to do is I need to accept the fact that like whatever happens next is going to happen next. Maybe I'll end up in hospital. Maybe I'll die. Odds are I'm probably going to be okay. And what you have to do in that moment is really just surrender into that emotion of just, I'm going to be okay. And if I'm not okay, that's okay too. And so the idea with a phobia, the last part of it is it's an emotion that you're in a car, someone else is driving, and you just have this immense feeling of like, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do. And so the way you actually start creating the new wiring in the brain is that you then ask yourself, so what's the worst that would happen here? As opposed to
mm,
stopping on the fear, you go, what's the worst that would happen here? We have a car accident. Okay, fine. We're driving 30 miles per hour on a bridge. Yes, we could die, but odds are it's going to be a fender bender.
mm,
Okay, fine. Aside from that, if we drive off the bridge and go into the water, I'd have to break through the glass, or maybe I'd die, whatever it is. And what you do is you actually keep taking it more and more and more beyond the concept of just the bridge is scary into actually examining it and having your brain understand the fact that there's multiple outcomes instead of just the one saying bridge equals scary. And what you're doing is you're starting to branch out the neurology. Not all outcomes need to be positive because then you're just lying to yourself. You just go into all the outcomes and prove to yourself the fact that like regardless what happens, this is where I am right now and I'm going to be okay with it and I just have to surrender to it. The
mm.
whole idea here is it's like my one teacher said this. I don't even remember which teacher it was anymore, but basically said that if you've only got one option, you are stuck. If
Yeah.
you have multiple options, good or bad, at least then you feel that the possibility of choice. So if you say bridge equals danger or person driving and me having no control equals danger, you've only got one option. If you say person driving and we may end up okay, person driving and I may die, person driving and we end up in a fender bender, person driving and we have to call 911. What's happening now is even though some of those situations are bad, weirdly enough, it breaks the phobic reaction.
It reminded me of another bit of an extreme example with the car. Back in one of my old jobs, we used to have to go places in a hurry with lights and sirens on quite a bit. And I remember being behind the wheel, and this was back in DC. This was some pretty crowded places, and I remember feeling in complete control behind the wheel, even if I had passengers or whatever. I'm like, checking the intersection. It's stressful to do that kind of thing.
I'm sure.
So you don't so much do it anymore because it's just too dangerous. But this was 20 something years ago. So, but I remember one of the things I used to do to calm myself down when one of my coworkers was driving was I would wait a second. I know how confident and in control I feel when I'm driving. I'm going to assume that this person feels that now, instead of just in my mind, like they just don't know what the fuck they're doing. So I would literally like project. I'm like, okay, wait a second. If he or she feels the way that I feel when I'm driving, then I got nothing to worry about. Just the way they shouldn't have to worry. Obviously, accidents happen, but so I used to do that as well, like a little bit of interchanging. Like, wait a second, why the fuck should I assume that I'd be any better at driving than this person?
And
You know?
basically what you're doing is like you're adding in an extra level of thought into it beyond just being in car, he's driving, I'm in shit. Going into being in car, he's driving, maybe there's a different way to look at this.
Yeah, yeah.
And that creates all the difference. It's like it's literally just allowing your brain to realize the fact that there's more than just one outcome to focus in on. And the moment you do that, the moment you move from one to two, it is a huge shift because from two, your brain will keep branching out to three, four, five, six, etc., and realize this is bad, this isn't bad, everything is going to be okay, possibly.
The main lesson with all of this is just finding more options. Just like you said, instead of going from one to two to three, and just get out of whatever your brain is headed down, whatever options you have to offshoot to, or whatever things you have to consider. Just start running other things through your mind, however implausible, just to get out of that one track. And I can tell from experience, just thinking about that one narrow thing, that's what causes anxiety attacks, is just not being able to break, keep the brain going different directions.
Here's where I get to mess with you some. So, like, let's actually put this into practice for Lee
Mm-hmm.
Payton, for example,
All right.
where looking at the idea of being at gym and someone says to you, "What do you do?" and you say, "Oh, well, I'm a digital nomad." And they go, "You're so lucky." Right now, you have the quote unquote phobic response of saying, "I feel guilty."
Hmm.
Or you come home from the gym and you go, "I should be working." And your first thing is, "I feel guilty." It's no different. The exact same thing fits in here where you need to create more responses for yourself to understand the fact that yes, guilt is a home. It doesn't need to be the home. And you go, okay, fine. You know what? I am a digital nomad and I worked really hard to get here. I can feel proud of myself. I'm a digital nomad, but you have no clue how hard it is. I can feel superior in my logic of the fact that I know what it took to get here, whatever it is. And the moment you open up your brain to feel differently than just guilt when you hear something like that or experience something like that, what you're doing is you're starting to break away from only going into the one chain reaction of going home to guilt every time.
I sometimes when people make that comment, like, "Oh, you're so lucky that you can work from home, you can work wherever you want." Um, a lot of times, what I'll do to offset that a little bit, just to change it, I was like, "Yeah, I am very lucky, but work kind of follows me 24 hours a day. Whereas you go to work and you leave it at work, and then it kind of starts a funny conversation, like, oh, that's true." So it's kind of a little bit of a deflection, but it's better than just being like, "Oh
It's
shit, you're right."
I'll say it's
you know.
better. The only challenge there is, and it's something that you do very often, we've discussed this before, is it's self deprecating to some degree,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like it's
Oh
just
yeah.
like you're in no way like why can't you just say, yeah, 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 that is lucky.
Yeah.
I worked hard to get here. Thank you so much. It was a long process in the making, and I'm lucky
Yeah.
this way now because I created my own luck.
That's
Like, what
so.
if you just stop there? It sounds too
It's so hard to
too
say.
narcissistic. It sounds too disgusting, like whatever
Yeah.
it is. And this is the thing that I want you to explain. I want you to understand the
Yeah.
fact that this feeling you got right now is
Mm-hmm.
not a 43-year-old's feeling. This is a child that's afraid of being judged incorrectly, being judged badly for being too flamboyant with their happiness. It's like
Yeah.
it's and so the moment I'm too high, someone is going to come and chop me down at my knees, kind of thing. As opposed to sitting there saying, I don't need to keep giving that kid energy.
Yeah.
You can say, yes, I'm lucky here. And in the back of your mind, at some point in time, you can say, and there's other places where I'm not lucky. You don't need to give it much more energy than that. But you can say, yeah, I am lucky. And
Yeah.
understand the fact that you created it and that that's where it stops. You don't need to deprecate yourself in order to like make this better.
Yeah. Boy, that's
You
tough, man.
deserve to have good in your life, Mr. Payton.
Yeah. Yeah. That's boy, that's going to be a work in progress probably for at least the next year. Because
It's
because
you
again,
call it a work in progress. It's
yeah.
and what I'll say is it can be a very, very, very quick change when you understand the fact. And I mean, it's again, we can do a session on this directly, but as soon as you understand the fact that this is just a child that has no other way to respond, it can be a work
Yeah.
in progress or it can be a goodwill hunting moment of sitting there going, it's not your fault. And you go, yeah, I get it. We can talk about this next week. And I go, no, listen to me. It's okay for you to feel good about yourself. Yeah, I get it. And I'll talk to you about it next week. Or no, Lee, listen to me. It's okay for you to feel good about it. Not you, Ori. Don't you do this to me.
Yeah.
Listen to me, Lee. You deserve to be happy too. And when you can actually let that in and let the child understand the fact that what he's afraid of is no longer a reality for him, that if you're happy, the world isn't going to collapse and no one's going to come and hurt you, that kid can finally lay down his shield, lay down his armor, and say, I'm going to be okay.
But if I need to get this tattooed, the kid driving the bus thing, I swear it comes up. I mean, obviously it comes up all day, but
For all
just
of us, it's like I said, rule number one.
yeah, the change, the amount of change that I've experienced just when I'm wise and mindful enough to think about it. You know, I was like, oh, that's right.
What
Yeah.
you really need to do here, Lee, is understand the fact that this is not theory. I hate talking in theory. I like talking in practice. This is something that you can do very easily by just not letting this kid continue to tell you that it's dangerous. You're 43 freaking years old. If you tell someone that your life is good, 42
4.
or oh 44,
Oh,
you're
look out.
44 freaking years old.
10.
If you tell a person that you are good at something or that you're lucky, it doesn't mean that bad things are going to happen to you. And I want you to really, really, really lock this into your neurology as much as possible, really understanding the fact that you get to actually be happy in this life. You're 44. I get the fact when you're 7 years old and you show up at school and you got the new shoes and the kids tease you for it. I get that. You're no longer at school.
What a strange trajectory too for some of us that like started off like in working. Like I know you've had jobs too where you probably had to go to an office. All you know, like we're kind of that age where half of our professional lives were spent doing the normal, what was considered normal industrial
9 to 5 as such, yeah.
Yeah. And then now we're like all in one way or another, we're all kind of shifting a little bit, and like how certain generations, that's all they knew, and how, you know, some of the younger ones, not all, but some of the younger kids, like that's all they'll know is kind of like just, you know, remote. Or what a weird thing to hang on to, like to feel guilty about. It's like, I'm not in office all
It's
day, you
crazy.
know?
And
Yeah.
and in the same way, like I was saying earlier, it's like it really struck me in terms of like how many times I tell myself I'm being lazy when the truth is, why in the world? Like, I mean, laziness was created by a society that requires you to be productive.
Mm-hmm.
Human beings weren't made to have to be productive, but society put it that way that this is our next way of looking at the world. It's a crazy, crazy thing.
Yeah.
And so, yes, you need to go into an office and you need to sit in a cubicle and you need to be in a line and you need to produce X number of widgets a day. Otherwise, you're bad.
Yeah.
Or you can just basically say, like, I'm choosing not to play by these rules anymore. And that's really, to me, the core basis of what human evolution movement is about. At the deepest core level of it, it's understanding the fact that you are surrounded by sheep and you've been buying like a sheep, you've been acting like a sheep, but the truth is you're not a sheep. You've always been a wolf in sheep's clothing. That you don't need to play by their rules in order to survive in this world.
Can't think of a better place to stop. That is like perfect. We've got some exciting stuff coming up. This episode will be out on Thursday, the 15th. We do have an upcoming in real life, IRL, as the kids like to say, in Florida. We'll be down there with Brittany Carpenter of Dietitian Brittany fame, and our social media guy, Chris, and hopefully Natalie from California will be meeting up. But we'll be doing an in-person live broadcast from the beach, not literally from the beach. It's too hot down there. We'll be at a hotel near the beach, so we'll all be together in person for the first time. And we have some exciting announcements that are coming up. I don't want to tease too much of it out, other than it'll have a lot to do with Ori combining forces with Brittany for holistic health, for, you know, the physical side of things, the mental side of things. We'll stream it on all the platforms. It'll be more of a Q&A or like an Ask Me Anything type deal. And it'll be announced, of course, enough ahead of time for people to register and send your questions in so we can answer them, even if you can't be there in person. And we're very, very excited about that. So I don't know if you have anything to add to that, other than it's exciting to come back down and see you. It'll be a really good fucking
Absolutely
time.
amazing. It'll be great to actually be with you face to face. I believe that we're aiming for September 6th for it, which will be great. And it's just as a
Yep.
general rule, like I mean, just working with Brittany, it's she puts it so well. I just love the way she says stuff. But like it's really like I mean, I can work with people for months and years, whatever it is, and work on the mental aspect. But when you actually bring in the physical aspect, it changes everything. And for her, it's the exact same thing. She can work on the physical, but I work on the mental. And so just the idea of partnering up with her, it just feels like a match made in heaven. I'm so looking forward to what we're going to be sharing with people.
Absolutely. It's a powerhouse, and I'm really looking forward to it. We'll put out the information to that, the exact dates and times once we get them, and to be continued.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Lee.
Hey everyone, it's Lee. Just one more thing before you go. If you've ever wondered if journaling could change your life, you can find out for free by downloading the Emotional Alchemy Journal from the link in the description. Also, if you're looking to connect with people who are just as passionate about growth as you are, check out our Facebook community. It's a great place to discuss what you've heard on the podcast and get access to exclusive content and sessions that are only available there. Just search for Human Evolution Movement on Facebook, or you can find the link in the description. Until next time, keep challenging the chaos within, be a little kinder to yourself, and let's continue to evolve together.